Okay, so this is a quick update video on my car and its current status. Basically what's been done to it recently. As you probably already guessed from the title of this video, I had my rod bearings changed. And here they are. The topic of way too many pages of forum discussions online. So a quick bit about my car. This is my 2010 E92 M3 edition model. If you don't know what that means, you can either Google it or go watch my other video that I did explaining what's different about this car over a standard M3. If you're watching this video, chances are you already know all about the potential rod bearing issue that the S65 BMW V8s have. But let me put it in a nutshell for you anyway. Basically, the bearings that hold the crank that are inside the connecting rod journals at the bottom of the engine don't have enough clearance, which means oil starvation. And too much oil starvation leads to premature wear. And my camera could focus here. Okay. Too much oil starvation will result in two bearings going like this. Normally they sit like this and hold the crank. Wear too much, that happens, and then you basically got a $25,000 repair bill on your hands. So let me give you a quick bit of background into my ownership of this car so far. I've only had it since January of this year. Picked it up with only 38,000 kilometers on it, which is around 24,000 miles. Car now has 40,000 kilometers on it, 25,000 miles thereabouts. So admittedly I haven't driven it a huge amount, but couple reasons for that. One, I wanted to get my rod bearings replaced before I started driving it regularly, and two, I have an old beater Honda, which is what I use for my daily. Even though I've only driven it a few thousand kilometers thus far, has been absolutely perfect and a joy to drive. But I decided pretty much as soon as I got this car that I wanted to resolve the rod bearing issue so that I could drive it worry-free. So went to my local independent BMW specialist, who happens to own one of these cars himself and has done rod bearing jobs on several cars, including his own. His car is supercharged, by the way. He recommended B bearings. So if you've done any research online, chances are you've come across those. Basically, they're the only aftermarket rod bearing solution out there that addresses the clearance issue. In terms of how much actual extra clearance, I'm not sure of an exact number. I think it's like in the hundredths or maybe tenths of a millimeter, but that's all the extra clearance you need to basically resolve the issue. So as anyone with an M3 who's had their rod bearings replaced, I was slightly nervous about, what would the state of the old ones be, but turns out these ones, my original bearings, not terribly surprising because of the low mileage on these guys, but they had very little wear on them. You can see a little bit of heat scoring, but basically they weren't anywhere near failing. In theory, these B bearings should be good for the life of the engine. They have slightly more clearance than the stock bearings, as well as they're also made out of the original combination of lead and copper that the bearings in the 2008 to 10 M3's had in them. The 2011 to 13 M3's had a much harder bearing made out of tin and aluminum, I believe. So those bearings, in theory, last longer because they're harder, but that still doesn't guarantee that they won't fail. And if they do fail, there's more of a chance that they will damage the crank. As well as being made out of a harder material, an oil analysis is basically useless with the updated bearings. I was doing some digging online. Basically, the only reason that BMW went from the original lead copper softer bearing to the harder one is because of EU regulations mandating that car manufacturers aren't allowed to put lead in their cars anymore. So the B bearings are made out of lead copper, just like the original bearings, which means an oil analysis will still tell you something. So basically, if you've got a 2011 to 13 up M3, it's even more important that you get your rod bearings changed, because you're not going to be able to know the state of them until you actually take them out. So along with the new bearings, my motor also has ARP rod bolts and Fuchs racing oil, 10W60 obviously, sticking with the factory recommended weight. As of yesterday, I also had a Active Auto Work catless X-pipe and ECU tune put on this car with an 8,800 RPM redline. Yeah, you heard that right, 8,800 RPM redline in this baby now. It's pretty nuts. The actual power and torque gains is not very much. It's only like around 15 horsepower with the tune, and in theory around an extra 15 with the X-pipe, because the only real restriction in the stock exhaust are the primary cats. So I knew I wanted to get rid of those. I didn't want to do test pipes because I decided I wanted to keep my stock exhaust totally intact, and I'm still running the stock muffler. So the sound balance is amazing, but there'll be lots of videos of that coming later. Price-wise, the whole job was, well, it was right around $3,000 Canadian. So whatever that would translate into American dollars, I don't know, 2,500 thereabouts, I would think. So yeah, if you have an M3 with a V8, the S65, you know, E93, E90, or E92, and you're looking to replace your rod bearings as preventative maintenance, you're looking around $2,500 US, or around $3,000 Canadian. And this is from an this would be at an independent dealer, or independent shop rather. I don't even want to think what a BMW dealer would charge me to have rod bearings replaced, and I highly doubt that they would install aftermarket ones for me. So basically everything you're paying for when you get this done, other than the rod bearings themselves, includes, well, rod bolts, obviously, because those can't be reused, oil, obviously, and the oil pan gasket, and sometimes motor mounts if necessary. My motor mounts were, well, according to the technician, in perfect condition, so they didn't need replacing. But if your car is higher mileage, chances are you might need new motor mounts as well, and then obviously labor on top of all of that. So that's basically where we're at the moment. It's a very happy, healthy motor now. The B bearings combined with the new oil, ARP bolts, and a few nice little mods on the side, it's going to make for some fun adventures with this thing. So hopefully this video was somewhat informative or interesting or helpful. If you're watching it, I'm sure it's because you searched E92 M3 rod bearings into YouTube, just like I have a billion times before I bought this car. If you like this kind of video, subscribe, and hopefully see you later.